Hello, this is Steven Johnson. I'm the data community advocate here at Shipyard. And you'll probably notice that this video is a little bit longer than the general video that we make. Usually those videos are 3, 4, 5 minutes, those A to B solutions. But we wanted to put together something that was kind of an end-to-end solution. So we're starting with raw data coming from an API, and we're going to take that into Shipyard and actually create a full data project from end to end for you. So that being said, the way that we're going to do that and the objective that we're going to try to solve here is we're going to take some data from Peloton. So that's a fitness community, the Peloton bike, which is behind me over there. But they have all kinds of classes: running, rowing, strength, so on and so forth. But what I really wanted to focus on in this project is, I don't know if you're anything like me and you work from home. I end up sitting down in my chair probably 95% of the day. That's definitely not the goal, but that's definitely what ends up happening. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to like schedule some stretches to happen, some yoga to happen throughout the day. 2 or 3 yoga or stretching classes that are 5 to 10 minutes long throughout the day, just to get up and kind of get away from work, clear the mind a little bit, and just help my body from having to sit in a chair all day. So with that being said, that's what we're going to solve. Is we're going to make it so I can get a daily alert through my email if I have not taken a stretching class that day. So looking at how we're going to accomplish that, so looking at our agenda for what's going to happen in this video, so we're going to start off with extracting data from Peloton. So we're going to have to use Python to do that. So a little bit of Python knowledge is going to be required here. We're going to walk through that code. And so if you use Peloton as well, you should be able to extract your data from Peloton after that as well. After we get the data from Peloton, the second step is we're going to clean that data. So there's some anomalies in the data that we need to take care of. So we're going to take care of that using Python and Pandas as well. Next, so inside of Shipyard, we have a blueprint that allows you to upload a CSV into Snowflake as a table. So we're going to do that. And then last but not least, we're going to set up that daily alert. So that's using Shipyard and SQL. So we're going to be using some SQL to take the data back from Snowflake and making a query to get just the data that we want. And then we're going to use Shipyard to run this whole process and set up a trigger to actually make this thing run like we want it to. So I wanted to lay out what you need to know before you jump into this video. And so I'm kind of assuming that you know. So this video is aimed at kind of a data engineer or data analyst. Definitely not a senior data engineer or senior data analyst. I want this video to be approachable for anyone in the space. But again, we will use some low-level Python and SQL. Again, I will walk through that whenever I'm writing it, and I'll try to explain what's happening as I go. But there will, of course, be some Python and SQL used. And then, of course, this video will use Shipyard. And so Shipyard is our tool it's an orchestration tool, but we're not really going to use it for orchestrating other tools. We're going to use this to build out a process, and so we can automate this process to run every single day and send us an alert. So without further ado, let's jump into extracting that data from Peloton. So starting off with our extraction, I wanted to start off inside of Peloton here and kind of show the data that I wanted to pull out. So looking at my profile here, so we can start off by going to the workouts. And secondly, if you can tell, my Peloton username is Hybrid Theory. If you know what that comes from, we'll get you some bonus Shipyard bucks down in the comments. Definitely not a real thing, but I'd love to know if anyone can tell the reference. But jumping over into the workouts tab here inside of Peloton, you can see I have 1,300 workouts here. You scroll down, you can see all the workouts here. We get some numbers on the sides, but so on and so forth there. So we have all our workout data. If I click on those workouts, it's going to show even more data that you can see per workout. And you can see up here on the top, we do have a download workouts button that will send you a CSV of your workouts. The problem with that is you can't access that using code, and you can't access that using API. So we have to do something a little bit different. So with that in mind, I'm going to pop into Shipyard and we're going to go and start with this coding process. So we're starting off with a fresh fleet here, building out, and we're going to start off by using some Python code. So we don't have a Peloton blueprint. There's not a big business use case for that just yet. I'll keep talking to my boss and see if we can get one made at some point. But so we're just going to write some custom Python code. So I just want to preface this by saying that this Python code is not all mine. I did use Google and found some help on using the Peloton API. So I used some code from Al Chen. I'm going to link his code directly in the comments below. I modified it to get exactly what we want here. But I did start off with kind of his code. So I wanted to make sure I linked that off on the bottom so you can go look at his full project as well. So with that in mind, I want to kind of copy and paste a little bit. So, well, first off, we got to create a Python vessel. So creating the Python vessel there. So it's going to create a vessel for us over there in the Fleet Builder. And so now we can actually start writing our code. So we want to start off by naming this extract data from Peloton. So that's our vessel name. It's down here on the bottom. We can do this extraction.pub. And then our code box, this is where we're going to write our code. So I have my code over here on my other monitor. I'm not going to bore you by typing this code out piece for piece. I'm going to kind of like copy it in chunks and paste it in. And I'll kind of explain what each one of these chunks are doing and then what we need to do inside of Shipyard to make them work. So starting off with our imports here. So we're going to import request, JSON, Pandas, and OS. So we're going to use each one of those in our code later on. But inside of Shipyard, the only thing that you have to do different that you wouldn't have to do in your local machine, well, I guess you would have to do it in your local machine depending on whether you have these installed or not, is you have to install these packages. So if I scroll down here under Python packages, if I want to add my Python packages, we need to do request, and then we need to do Pandas, and we don't have to do JSON or OS because we have those automatically installed for you, and you can see what happens if you try to install like an OS or a JSON. It's going to tell us that it's an internal module and should not be installed. So we'll get rid of that. So we have request and Pandas. You can see we can choose a specific version, but for our project, it's not going to matter too much what that specific version is. So with that being said, we have those Python packages installed, so we're good to go there. So moving on to the next part of our code, which is our Peloton username and Peloton password. So best practice for coding, best practice no matter what you're doing, whether you're using Shipyard or not. You definitely don't want to expose your password or username for any application just to any user that can log in and look at it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use environment variables to hide this from anyone else seeing it. So if I look down here for environment variables, you can see the environment variable is going to be named username and password, and then I'm going to reference those as Peloton username and Peloton password in the code. So I can come down here. I want to add an environment variable. I want to add username. And then just like what I saw from Peloton, my username is Hybrid Theory there. So I can paste that in there, just show that that's what's actually being pasted. And then secondly, we want to do password there. I'm going to type my password in. I'm not going to show that because it's my password, but you'll have to trust me that the password's in there. And so that's going to send the values for username and password into the code there, and I can reference them later on as Peloton username and Peloton password. So with that being said, that's all the work we need to do to get set up there. And so now we need to actually work through our code here that's going to get our data from Peloton. So this is where the code gets a little bit more complicated here. So that you can see we're using request here for this base URL. There's our Peloton username and Peloton password there that's getting referenced from those environment variables from earlier. You can see we're logging in here, base URL plus that auth login. And I want to go through all this code. I'll post the full code for you to look at so you can reference it if you want to use this as well. But just so you can see, we're getting our workouts here in a JSON there from the workouts page URL. And then scrolling down here, we can see we kind of do a little bit of cleanup here to get the ID, so performance, so on and so forth there. So that's going to get our data into this workout data dictionary. And so now what we want to do, so first off, or let's see, so the next thing we want to do is we want to, so after we have that data, we go ahead and enter a new line there, unindent. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take the keys from our workout data and we want to turn them into a list so we can loop through these workouts. So what this is going to do is this is going to get the IDs from the workout so we can loop through them. And then next, we're going to make a new list of workouts here. So we're going to make these turn into a list. So workout for key and workouts, we're going to loop through those, pin that to that workout list there. We can do it, and then we're going to turn that into a data frame. And then after we turn that into a data frame, we are going to export that as a CSV. So with that, we're going to take our workout data and it's going to export it as a CSV. But we also want to be able to test and make sure that what we have is actually the data that we want. So we can also do a print df.head and maybe just print the first three there, just so we can have an idea of what we're working with. But then you can see we're turning this into a CSV called Peloton data.csv. So with the work in this vessel, it's going to take our workout data, it's going to turn it into a Pandas data frame, send it out as a CSV. Now that it's all formatted like we want it to, and that Peloton data.csv is what we're going to reference. In the second vessel that we're going to clean up that CSV. All right, so starting off here, I wanted to start off by showing the data that we just extracted in the last step. So you can see I put this into a Google Sheets just to kind of show off what we want to do in this next step here in the transformation phase. So you can see the columns like created at, end time, start time. So all these time columns, Peloton is sending us an epoch time. It's not very readable. I have no idea what those actually stand for. So I want to go ahead and convert those into a date time so that we can actually use them to set up the alert that we're going to do later on. So let's do that inside of Shipyard. So jumping back in the Shipyard here, we have our first vessel. So we want to create a second vessel using Python. So I can click that. I can connect those together based on that being successful. We're going to do transformations with Python, with Pandas. So we're going to do transformation.py, works there. So again, the same thing here. I'm going to copy and paste some code in just so you don't have to watch me type it all. So the key the starters here, we want to import our packages. So import Pandas that we're going to use for transformations. Import date time, which is what we're going to use to convert epoch into date time form. So let me go ahead and install Pandas for us down here in the Python packages, just like we had to on the last step. So there's that. And the next step is really important. It's something that we see users kind of mess up on if they're starting with Shipyard all the time. So this Peloton underscore data.csv that we created in the first vessel, we can now reference in any vessel downstream. So I can reference that just like I would on my local file system. So there's that. So it's reading it in as that data frame Peloton data. So the next chunk of code here is what we're going to use to convert the epoch times. So let me go ahead and do this, scroll over a little bit. So you can see I have the columns that I want to convert. So created at, end time, start time, created, device time created at, so on and so forth there. So those are the columns I want to transform into regular date time versus epoch time. And you can see that we can just do that with this PD to date time there. So that works there. And so the next step is something a little bit different. It's not really a transformation, but it is adding a column for us. And so that column, go ahead and new line down. So you can see this is Peloton data, load date is date time now. So the reason we're adding this column in is because we're going to end up with some duplicate data inside of this database inside of Snowflake whenever we upload it, because we're going to continually just pull the last 100 workouts and just keep accumulating those. So that means every day that I run this, it's going to get some duplicates of those workouts that were there before. So what we're doing here with this load date is we're going to add a load date column so we know when the data was loaded in. And so later on, whenever we're working in the SQL, we can actually take care of that and take care of those duplicates based on this load date column. So kind of keep that in the back of your head, and we're going to come back to that later on. And then last, but certainly not least, we want to take this Peloton data frame, send it out as a CSV. And this time we're going to name this one Peloton data underscore date time.csv. We could just keep it the same name, but I like to keep them separate names just so I can have both of them if I want to reference them later on. So that's all the transformation that we're going to do. So now we're going to take this table into Snowflake. So now that our data is ready, we're able to take it into Snowflake. So I want to show off kind of what that table already looks like in Snowflake before we import this new data into Snowflake. So clicking in the Snowflake, you can see that data looks just like that that Google Sheets that I showed you earlier. So same kind of data here, and so we're going to go ahead and append the data that we just got in that CSV to this table. So jumping back in the Shipyard to do that, we can go ahead and click to add a new vessel. We can search for our Snowflake vessels and then upload a CSV to table. Close that. I'm going to use our credential management system here to add in some credentials there, and then I'm going to say upload Peloton data as the name of that there. I can drag this over, connect them together based on a success. So now we just got to fill in some information. So we're going to put this in the test warehouse in the demo DB database. The schema is Snowflake video. For the file name here, it's going to be the same file name that we took from here. So that file name was Peloton data datetime.csv. So that's the same thing that we want to reference in this vessel as well. And the table name we can see here is Peloton. So that's what we want to call it. So this is the Peloton table.
And then, like I mentioned before, we want to append the data. So again, just like I mentioned in that second vessel, so since we're appending this data, that is going to give us some duplicates. So we're going to take care of that in the next step. So I just wanted to note that. So we are going to have multiples of the same workout, but that load time or that load date column is going to take care of those duplicates for us in the next step. So now you can see that we have our first vessel that's extracting data from Peloton. Our second vessel is transformations with Peloton. And then now our third vessel is uploading that data with into Snowflake, into that Peloton table. So now our next step is going to be creating that alert for us on a daily basis. Okay, so now that we have our data inside of Snowflake, now we can create our daily alert to see whether we've stretched or not that day, or whether we've actually got up from our seat during our work. So to do that, we're going to use another Snowflake blueprint that we have. So we're going to use this Snowflake store query results as CSV here. I'm going to take that, connect them together. I'll move over here, but so we can see daily stretch alert is what I'll call this. And so again, we're going to want to use our Snowflake credentials here again. So click those, add those in. So we're going to do our test warehouse here, the demo database that we did earlier, the Snowflake video schema. And then we'll just call this stretch.csv. That's what the file is going to be generated for here. And then the query that we want to run. So this is a bit of a more complicated SQL query. So I'm going to copy and paste it in, and then talk through it here. So we can see here what we're doing is first off we're using a window function of the row number here and partitioning by the ID. So that's what's going to take care of those duplicate rows that we're going to have inside of our table. So if they have the same workout multiple times, we're going to partition it and do a row number by the load date there, just so we can just get the most recent one. And then down here on the bottom, we're going to select everything from that new table that we just created. We're only going to look at the most recent row number, which is by that load date there. And we only want data coming back if it's a yoga or stretching class. So from our Snowflake data, you can see that we had meditation, there's stretching, yoga, stretching, walking, running, cycling. Caesar is the rowing. So we have all kinds of data in there, but we only want yoga and stretching because that's what we want for our daily alert. And then we want the date, the start time, to only be the current date. So we only want this to return data if there has been a yoga or stretching class done on this specific day. So with the way that our functionality is set up inside of Shipyard, if this query goes to Snowflake and there's no data returned, it's going to throw an error here. So this vessel will actually fail running. So now that we know that, we can use that functionality to actually set up an alert for us here. So going back to our vessels, we want to set up an email vessel. So send message. So again, if this fails, we want a message. So I'm going to connect them together. So in between, you can see that it automatically set to success, which we have not changed yet, but we are going to change here to be an error. So if this daily stretch alert errors out, we want an email to be sent. So I'm going to call this stretch alert email. And again, I can use our credential management system to fill in some email information there. Sender address, we'll just send it from test@shipyard.com. We're going to send this to myself. Subject line, stretch alert. And the message is, hey, Steven, go stretch. Okay, so that's just going to tell me, hey, Steven, you have not got up from your chair today and done a stretch. Hey, go do that. So that's going to work perfectly for us there. So it looks like we're good to go on the setup there for the email blueprint. So you just running back through our fleet one more time. So we're going to take the data from Peloton in this first vessel. If that's successful, we're going to transform it. So it's adding that extra column for the load date and turning the epoch times into a date time in those columns. We're then going to upload our Peloton data to that Peloton table. We're going to go look and see if we've taken a stretch or yoga class on that day. And if not, it's going to fail out, in which case we will send a stretch alert email. So it looks like we got it set up to set up that daily alert like we want it to. So the only thing we have to do now is set up for this thing to actually run, because it doesn't matter how great the functionality is if we're not actually running this fleet. So we're going to go over here to, first off, let's rename this to Peloton Stretch Alert. So that's good there. So let me click and save that. So we know that whenever I go back into my project, I'll know that that's what this fleet's actually doing. And then we can pop over here into the triggers, and we can set this thing using our scheduling trigger here to run every single day. So I'm going to do that. How often? I want to do it daily. and I want to do this so I want to give myself a little bit of time to stretch. I'm going to set this for 1 p.m. So if I have not gotten up from my chair and stretched that day by 1 p.m., I want this to send me an alert saying, hey, Steven, go stretch. Okay, so that's going to do that. So I can click save. And now what we can do is we can come back and we can test this thing. So we can go ahead and click run now up here on the top right-hand corner. And this is just going to kick this thing off to run. Spoiler alert, I have not stretched today yet. You can see it's only 11:40 a.m. Haven't stretched today. So, you know, this should send back a failure. So you can see inside of our log, this is going to kind of give us a kind of a play-by-play of what's happening, kind of a vessel-by-vessel breakdown of this thing as it's running. And so while that's happening, I can also show off up here on the top inside of our platform. We do also have version controlling here. Which I think is pretty cool because we're going to be able to see kind of step by step as we've built this thing. So every time I click save inside of our application, it's going to create a new version for us here. So this is going to be pretty neat because it's going to show us kind of piece by piece as we've built this thing. So if I go back to version 1, you can see all we had there was just extract data from Peloton. Same thing for version 2. We've added in transformations with Python. Version 3, we've added in the email and whatnot there. And then version 4, we added in triggers. So it's kind of giving you kind of a historical log of what's happened there. If I wanted to go back to any of those versions, I can revert back, or I can create a new fleet from that version if I wanted to as well. So a lot of functionality there in the version control tab inside of Shipyard. So let me pop back into the logs, click into this. You can see it's still extracting that data from Peloton. So we'll come back whenever this fleet's finished running, and we can look at the results. So we can see inside of our fleet log that our fleet is completed running. You can see the status up here on the top as an error. You would usually think that might be a sound for alarm, but not in this fleet. So we kind of set this thing up as erroring would be normal. And so you can see that the vessel that errored out is a daily stretch alert down here. So if I scroll down, I can click on that, and you can see that it says the query did not return with any data, so no file was created, which is what the source of that error was. So that is normal for our circumstance here because I have not done a stretch or yoga class today, so that query is not returning any data based on our query that we sent it, so it's sending back an error, which is how we set it up. So since that is an error, it kicked off that email vessel here, and you can see that the message was successfully sent. I could even pop over to my email, and I can see that I have my stretch alert here that says, "Hey Steven, go stretch." So it's doing exactly what we wanted it to there. So now that we've completely set up this full pipeline, go back to our fleet builder that takes data from Peloton's API using Python, transforms the data using Python, uploads the data to a Snowflake table, and then searches that data to see if there's any daily classes with stretching and yoga. And if not, it will send an email to me letting me know that, hey, Steven, you need to get up from your seat from work and you need to go stretch. You need to go do some yoga.
While you may not be a Peloton user or a fitness enthusiast in general, I hope that you can see how the process that we use in this video can be replicated in data projects for your organization. While we glossed over the build process pretty quickly here, I hope you can see how Shipyard can be used to get data processes up and running quickly for your organization. We can do that in 2 ways. One way is using our native low-code blueprints. We have those blueprints made for most of the big data vendors, and that list continues to grow. All you need to use for these is your authentication information and then some job information for that specific tool, and you can get those things up and running without writing any Python code at all. However, if your organization does like using Python code, you can input your code directly from your local machine into Shipyard without using any decorators or adding anything to your code at all. If your code runs on your local machine, it'll run inside of Shipyard. If you want to get started, feel free to click the link in the description below to start with our free developer plan to get up and running and test out Shipyard for your organization. If you'd like to chat with one of our data experts, you can also click on the link in the description to do that, and we'd love to help you get started inside of Shipyard.